Morning, Westside. Man, you wanna know what's crazy? How marriage, the institution of marriage, has lasted so long, how it has withstood the test of time and is still around today after being around for thousands of years. I mean, is anyone else surprised by that? I mean, when you consider our growing need for things to be increasingly convenient and easy, our need for variety, keeping our options open, when you consider the ratio of unhealthy, unhappy marriages to healthy, happy ones, when you consider all of the forces that weigh against marriage in our world today and throughout forever, it is remarkable that marriage has survived in the way it has. And whether you believe the Bible or not, no one disagrees with the fact that marriage is old, thousands of years old. This tradition is still around in the human community. Matter of fact, if you believe the Bible teaches, the Bible's claim is that the marriage is actually the original human community. Now, I'm pretty sure if I were God, I can't say this, but I think if I were God, I don't know that I would have come up with marriage. I don't know that I would have done this. In my imagination, I don't know if I would have cooked that up. And if I had, I don't think I would have put it where God put it, weaving it into the very foundational fabric of human civilization and expansion. In the very first chapter of the Bible, God creates humans to be mirrors of his image in this world, reflections of him in this world. So Genesis 1:27 says this. It says, God created mankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. The grammar is such that it covers all of the bases, that male and female are both together as a unity and separately as individual entities are designed to reflect and mirror God. That means that masculinity and femininity are designed to reflect attributes and characteristics of God that the other is not as well equipped to reflect. Now, I realize that you might have a very complicated relationship with femininity. Whether that's your own or someone else's, I know it can get complicated. Maybe a mix of resenting it, celebrating it, or maybe for you, it's a complicated relationship with masculinity. Whether yours or someone else's, enjoying it, celebrating it, or coveting it, resenting it. And you're in good company. You got to know, hey, it's all good here. You're in good company. We know around here how complicated relationships can get. But what you need to know is that in the beginning, God created masculinity to be a fantastic thing. And he created femininity to be a fantastic thing. Each of these things designed to reflect different but no less spectacular dimensions of our strong and beautiful God. As an aside, I don't know how much you know about 4,000-year-old ancient Near Eastern beliefs about women, but you got to know that this line in Genesis is pretty unheard of. Like what this is saying, by casting women to be of equal value and dignity and worth and function as men, this line offered an extraordinarily high view of women for its time. So in chapter 1, it says he created male and female in his image. And then chapter 2 of the Bible rewinds the tape a little bit and replays the story back in slower motion, retelling the story of how God created humankind, male and female, in more detail. Eddie actually touched on this in week 1 of our series, and you actually might know the story already, at least some of it. Genesis 2:7 says this, said, the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground, the clay, the earth, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man, poof, became a living being. Doesn't go into a lot of detail here, but the cartoon version is that, God kind of took some handfuls of dirt, of earth, and he molded them, he shaped them into the form of a man, and he breathed spirit into the man, and boom, there he was. Totally whole, totally human being right there. But there's a problem, of course. The man was alone. And the text says, the story says, this is not good, which is a little striking because actually everything up until this point in chapter 1 and even in chapter 2, everything that God has created is good. He creates light and it's good. He creates the oceans and it's good. He creates humankind and it's very good, but man is alone and that's not good. So it's jarring. It's like we got a problem here. It's the only thing in creation that's not good, man's aloneness. And God's like, we got to solve that problem. Now, if I were God, this doesn't seem like a real big, significant problem to solve. I'm pretty sure I know what I would do, and it's not rocket science. If he's alone, you make another one. You make a Play-Doh, like another Play-Doh guy, breathe into him, boom, problem solved, right? Well, and God kind of does this. He kind of does this. He actually, the same ground, the same earth from which he created man, he creates the animals. And he brings them to the man, and the man names them, showing his authority over the animal kingdom. And that doesn't solve the problem of the man's aloneness. So what does God do next? Again, the obvious solution is still on the table. But God's like, I got a better idea. So what does he do? He puts the man into a deep sleep. Other parts of the Bible use sleep as a metaphor for death. So who knows what's actually going on here, but in any case, he puts the man into a deep sleep and removes part of the man, apart from his side, a rib is what the original text says. And then from this rib, he forms woman. Whatever it is, it used to belong to the man, but now he removes it and forms woman out of this piece that used to belong to the man, as if man was to be sacrificially giving of himself for her sake from the very get-go, from the very beginning. So God forms woman out of this piece. And boom, there she is. And the man is like, yes. The joke is, whoa, man, yes, right? He's like, this is bone of my bone, this is flesh of my flesh. He's like, her essence is like mine in a way that no other creature shares with me. This is it. And the narrator breaks in and says, this is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife. And that used to be a line I'd skip over, but the more years in ministry I have, like the more significant I think this line, the implications of this line are. This verse isn't talking about a logistical thing or a thing that happens ceremonially, the man leaving his parents' household. What this is talking about is a transfer of responsibility. This is all about responsibility. When a man gets married, he is no longer the responsibility of his parents. He leaves their umbrella of responsibility. And when he leaves and cleaves to his wife, he is now chiefly responsible for his family. So at the wedding, a new family is born that he's responsible for. Now, if this is right, if this really is how God thinks of marriage, how he designed marriage, then we got to talk about our English. Our English is a little messed up. When we talk about a couple starting a family, what do we mean? We mean having kids, as if kids make the family. And this is utterly confused in our language, fundamentally mistaken. Marriage, according to the Bible, marriage is what starts the family. Children simply expand the family, extend it. But marriage, the wedding is where it starts. If you've ever heard of couch time, it comes from this principle. You might call it something else. We always call it couch time. Couch time is when a couple routinely, regularly, with some regularity, spends quality time with each other, maybe on the couch or maybe at the kitchen table or something. Not after the kids go to bed, but while the kids are still awake, while they are still aware, while it's possible for them to be aware that mom and dad are spending time together without them, without their ability to interrupt them. And I know it sounds like you're totally ignoring your kids for a length of time, prioritizing your spouse over your kids, because that is exactly what you're doing. Yeah, that's it. Like, you got it. Because your kids need to see that. They need to know that the family doesn't rest on their shoulders. They are not the center of the family. So they don't need to anxiously put themselves and their performances at the center of the family's attention in order to hold it all together, in order to keep everything good in the family. No, mom and dad have got this. The pressure is off of us and we can go be kids now. A speaker at a Smart Marriages conference a while back was prepping for his talk, and he in preparation, asked his 17-year-old daughter about what it was like for her. What was it like for you when your mom and I used to do couch time and we used to kick you guys out? He set it up a little bit. He said, when we would do our couch time, we would say, all right, kids, your mom and I are going to be in the living room for the next 30 minutes. Do not come in the living room. Do not interrupt us. You can be anywhere else in the house, but you're not in the living room. If you got a problem, figure it out. If you got a question, it can wait. If there's an emergency, you know how to dial 911. There's the phone, right? We love you. Stay out of the living room for the next 30. And he checked in with his 17-year-old daughter. He's like, when we used to do that, how did that make you feel? Did you feel neglected, unloved? And she thought about it for a second. And she said, you know what? We felt safe. When you and mom would spend time together without us, enjoying each other's company, we kids felt safe. There's a lot of things you can give your kids in this lifetime. But possibly the best thing you can give your kids is a healthy marriage. You do your kids an enormous favor when you put them second to your marriage. It becomes, those kids, it makes for much less anxious kids who grow into much less anxious adults. Kids do not start the family. It starts at the wedding. And talking like kids start the family might lull us into thinking that the most basic fundamental relationship of the family is the parent-child relationship. And you know what, honestly? That would make sense to me. That really would make sense to me. If I were God, designing this whole thing, cooking this whole thing up, even if I were to come up with marriage, I would not put it where he puts it, at the foundation of the whole family. I mean, come on, what bond is stronger than blood? I share DNA with my kids. You can't undo that. Why on earth would you base the family on the relationship that is solely reliant on the will and integrity of two flawed individuals making and keeping promises to each other? You're going to base the family on that, God? I mean, either God is crazy, or he's foolish, or he knows something we don't know about the kind of bond that is possible within a marriage relationship. And the way God sees it, the way he designed it to be, is stronger than blood. It says this. Again, this is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Oh, there it is. There it is. The two become one flesh. That is the Bible's most foundational, most succinct explanation, understanding of what marriage is and what happens in a marriage, what marriage does. Marriage is a profound union, or maybe a reunion, of two organisms into one. And not to be graphic here, but you can't miss this. Please don't miss that whenever the Bible says that two are becoming one, it is both a description of marriage and simultaneously a description of the sexual experience. It is describing two events as if they are purposed and designed to go together inseparably. Before I was married, I used to wonder why on earth God made the no sex until you're married rule, right? Like, God, why did you make this rule? Why did you draw the line at marriage? I mean, why didn't you draw the line at the 1 year mark, for example, right? Or maybe better yet, the 6 month mark, right? Or maybe like just an internal sense of when you feel a certain way about somebody, then you're permitted, right? Why did you draw the line at marriage? And the more years I spend in my marriage, the more clear it is to me. I don't think he drew a line. He doesn't think of it as a line at marriage. I'm not even convinced God thinks of it as a rule. If you want to see it as a rule, if that's the clearest way to see it for you, so you don't break it, great. A rule that you're not supposed to break, if that's how you want to see it, more power to you. That's not going to hurt. It would not be wrong for you to think of it as a rule that's not to be broken. Just in the same way that it's not wrong for my 5-year-old to think of it as a rule in our house that using a storm window as a sled is not allowed, right? You know what? There's at least 2 reasons why I don't want my kid using a storm window as a sled. And so you know what? If she thinks of it as a rule in our house, you know what? That's fine with me. That is fine with me. But I don't think of it as a rule for myself. I'm pretty sure Chelsea doesn't think of it as a rule. My wife, you know, when she's got a hankering for some serious sledding in the backyard, I'm pretty sure she can go in the garage and see the storm window sitting there, and she's tempted. She's like, ooh, no. It's a rule in the Ewald house. I don't want to break that rule. She doesn't think of it as a rule. Well, why not? She's outgrown that way of thinking. She understands. She and I both understand. We're adults. We understand that a window's purpose, the designed purpose for a window, is not conducive to sledding, right? And as you mature, you outgrow this rule-oriented thinking. You learn that when you use something outside of its intended designed purpose, it first of all does a bad job of whatever you're using it for, whatever you're trying to get it to do. And things tend to get broken and people tend to get hurt. So when the Bible repeatedly refers to both marriage and sex as 2 becoming 1, I guess you can think of that as a rule if you want to. Sure, go for it. That's great. But probably the more mature way of understanding it is that God designed this for that. He designed sex to celebrate, to demonstrate, to embody the marriage relationship where 2 become 1. And when you use it outside of its designed purpose, sure, breaking a rule, okay. But it's also going to do a terrible job of whatever it is you're trying to get it to do. And people are probably going to get hurt. Maybe you've felt that principle in your marriage at some level, your relationship. You're increasingly hurt. This relationship isn't doing what you're wanting it to do, and that's a hard place to be. And honestly, it might have less to do with rule breaking. It might have less to do with you marrying the wrong person. And it might have more to do with a misunderstanding of God's intended purpose for your relationship. In most cases, dissatisfaction in your marriage doesn't mean you married the wrong person. It means you went into that marriage with the wrong expectation of what it's designed to do. Healthy marriages do a lot of things. Maybe you've seen the stats. Healthy marriages correlate to stronger economies, longer life expectancy, better mental health outcomes, medical health outcomes, higher life satisfaction outcomes. And all these outcomes might be clues, but they don't tell us with specificity a thing's purpose. If you went into marriage believing that marriage is designed to be a happy pill, it probably wasn't long before you realized that's not the right way to think about marriage. You probably learned real quickly that marriage isn't designed to make you happy. Well, then what is it designed for? What is the purpose of marriage? When I was single, I spent a lot of time doing ministry, and I really took advantage of my single years, pouring my time and energy into the ministry community that I was working in. And like the Apostle Paul said in 1 Corinthians 7, my energy and mental, emotional bandwidth was undivided. I could focus it on serving Jesus and working for Jesus. And when I got married to Chelsea, I didn't regret the decision. I never regretted my marriage, but I did immediately feel divided. Like I couldn't focus like I used to, focus on working for Jesus, serving Jesus, without it costing my marriage. And I felt some guilt. I felt a little bit of a less than feeling, like I was a little bit less of a Christian now that I was married. And it was around that time that I heard Gary Thomas speak, and he shared an insight that completely reframed my experience of marriage. He said, serving Jesus, it's a great goal. Becoming like Jesus, it's an equally great goal. Both of those goals are excellent, legitimate targets to aim your whole life at. And so if serving Jesus is your goal, singleness is hard to beat. It'll get you there. And if becoming like Jesus is your goal, marriage, it's hard to beat. There's no finer tool for that. Gary Thomas is the author who famously says that marriage isn't designed to make you happy, it's designed to make you holy, more Christ-like. Perhaps you've found that principle to be true. Perhaps you've noticed that your marriage has a way of exposing areas of pride and self-centeredness and sin in your life so that you can deal with them. And it does it like no other tradition or institution. And if you resist the process, if you deny what marriage is naturally bringing to the surface and you cling to your self-centeredness, I suspect marriage will be pretty brutal for you. But if you lean into it, trusting the process of marriage to refine you, allowing it to bring sin to the surface so you can address it, you will find the process of marriage to be a daily invitation to become more and more like Jesus. Maybe God has designed your marriage, whether you're male or female, He's designed your marriage to shape you into a person who looks and lives and loves more like Jesus every day. As it is with marriage, so also is with the Christian community. If the marriage is the original human community, then we'd expect that whatever works in the marriage also is going to work within the Christian community and vice versa. So in Paul's letter to the church community in Ephesus, Ephesus being a major metropolitan Greco-Roman metropolis in the first century, Paul is addressing the whole church community in Ephesus. And he says this to everybody. He says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Mutual submission. Submit. Man, that's an ugly word, isn't it? Centuries after centuries of people misusing their power have just made this a terribly ugly word in our ears. And though it might sound awful to us, to Paul and to Jesus and the rest of the New Testament, people, these guys who know from personal experience how their submission can be exploited, to them, it's actually not an ugly word, it's a beautiful word. To submit simply means to put yourself under someone or something else. To Jesus and Paul, it's not something that is compelled or forced. It is something that is given by choice. Therefore, submission is not, in the eyes of the New Testament, a mark of weakness or powerlessness. Submission is a remarkable sign of inner strength and will. Submission is the way you give something of value, not take something. So it's what the young boy Jesus did when he obeyed his parents. It's what the adult Jesus did when he took up the very nature of a servant and went to the cross. It's what the whole earth is designed to do before her creator. And it's what you do anytime you choose to cooperate for the sake of a cause that is higher, is bigger than you as an individual. And even more centrally, submission is the behavior of God Himself, as God the Spirit submits to God the Son, Jesus, and God the Son submits to God the Father. So without apology, mutual submission is a behavior expected of everyone in the church, where each of us is putting ourselves underneath the other in service to one another. So without apology says, all y'all submit to each other out of reverence and honor and respect for Jesus. And it's from this command to everybody that Paul spins off to address the households that he's writing to. That means the wives and the husbands and the children and the servants of a household. And the grammar that Paul uses to do this spin-off is telling. It's brilliant. I don't know how much of a grammar geek you are, but it's pretty thrilling. In the original word for word grammar, it probably sounded like this. He said, everyone submit to each other out of reverence for Christ, wives to your husbands. Notice what's missing there from that last phrase? Like the verb, the command to submit. See how, like when he's talking to wives, he's actually borrowing the command that he's already issued to the whole church. The command is clearly implied, but it's not stated. It's more gentle than that. And so your English translations appropriately fill in the blank so that it doesn't read so awkwardly. So they say, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. For wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. It's appropriate. Then Paul grammatically does the same thing a few verses later when he says, as the church submits to Christ, so also you wives should submit to your husbands and everything. But he says, as the church submits to Christ, so also you wives to your husbands. He leaves out that command again. Each time Paul addresses the wives on their behavior within the marriage, he borrows the verb that's commanded for everyone in the whole church. That means that it is incomplete and maybe even mistaken to see submission, the role of submission, as a standalone command for women. It's not. It is grammatically and theologically linked to the church's behavior toward one another. In Paul's view, wives are absolutely not the only ones expected to submit. They're instead invited to lead this entire church community in this attitude and behavior that everyone in the church is expected to demonstrate as it reflects Jesus. So ladies, if you ever hear some clueless dude try to use this line as a smirky punchline, say, woman, submit. Forgive him, for he knows not what he does. Yes, he is indeed demonstrating his ignorance of a lot of things, his ignorance of the damage done throughout the years, the pain caused by the misuse of masculine power over the feminine, victims, countless victims of misogyny, male chauvinism throughout the years. More centrally, he demonstrates an ignorance of Paul's words and his heart. Fellas, do not use the word submit as a punchline. And husbands, don't ever miss the fact that when your wife submits to you, she is willingly showcasing for you the behavior that God expects you to demonstrate to her and to the church community and to your Lord and Savior. Do not smear your ignorance all over this beautiful thing that's right in front of you and that is at the center of your faith. This fact that Jesus submitted himself to the Father, dealing the abuse of power a lethal blow, not by striking it, not by powering up over it, but by submissively dying under the weight of it. Do not profane this word. It is sacred. So you use your power and authority to keep it sacred. Well, what's a wife's submission supposed to look like? Well, actually, it's kind of expected for Paul in his day and age, in his Roman culture, it's expected for Paul to basically explain, clarify the wife's role to submit as obeying the husband in everything. Just do everything that the husband tells you to do. That's generally what Paul is supposed to say, according to the precedent in his culture, but he doesn't say that. He doesn't do that. Matter of fact, he doesn't really clarify. He leaves it fairly open. The only clue we have in this section is at the very end when Paul is kind of summarizing this section. He says, so again, I say each man must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. That's where he clarifies just a little bit. As much as a husband might like it, submitting to him does not mean mindlessly obeying everything he says. That'd be nice for him, but that's not what Paul's saying. No, it's far more of an attitude of respect. You are giving him honor. You're actually appreciating the fact that God sees him as ultimately responsible for his family. And you're empowering him to carry out that responsibility well. So wives, if you want to revolutionize your marriage, affirm him. Get in the habit of affirming him respectfully. Don't think, I know it's tempting, but don't think you can criticize him into being a better man, tearing him down until he takes the right shape. It's not going to work. And if that's been your strategy, I promise you it is not working for you. And actually, if he hasn't already begun tuning you out, he soon will, so that your words count less and less in his life, so that they hurt less and less in his life. Now instead, don't criticize him. Instead, if you want to change your man into a better man, if you want to build him into a better man, you affirm him into it. He'll grow into those shoes. You find that shred of good that's underneath all of his flaws. I know they're there. Ignore them. Find the good underneath all that, and you affirm the stink out of it. Like, go after that. Tell him what he's doing well, and he'll grow into it. I know, it is hard to affirm things that are not perfect. But when you do, you move them toward perfection. You build him with your words of affirmation. Now, in a Roman letter like this, Paul is expected, after telling the wives that their role is to submit, Paul is expected to turn to the husbands and say, okay, husbands, their job is to submit. Your job is to make sure they submit. Make sure they obey you in everything you say. Paul doesn't do that. In the face of his culture, in the face of expectations, subverting the cultural norms, he actually lets the fellas have it. In Paul's mind, he's giving the men here, the husbands here, the harder task. He says, for husbands, this means love your wives, just as Christ loved the church. And how was it that Jesus loved the church? He gave up his life for her to make her holy and clean, washed by the cleansing of God's word. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as they love their own bodies. For a man who loves his wife actually shows love for himself. No one hates his own body, but feeds and cares for it, just as Christ cares for the church. And we are members of his body. You hear what he's saying here? The implications? Talk a lot about bodies. What he's saying is, fellas, just as Jesus self-sacrificially loved his body, the church community, husbands, love your wives as surely and consistently and completely as you love your own body. You love her like you love yourself. Defending her, protecting her, serving her interests, treating her with the same dignity and respect and honor you wish to receive from others. Husbands, do not use the wives submit line to get your way. That line is not for you. No, you love your wife by giving up what you want, your way, for her sake, for her life. Husbands, if you want to revolutionize your marriage, it's so painfully simple. It feels like I'm insulting your intelligence, but you know what? I'm going to go for it because it's so underutilized that I got to tell you, it's simple. But if you want to change your marriage, make it a habit to thank her, appreciate her. I know that sounds simple, but I don't mean like think thoughts of affirmation. And appreciation. Like actually verbalize them, like say them out loud, Like identify what you're grateful for. Pay attention to the little things she does, and of course the big things, and tell her thank you. Make it a habit, a rhythm of thanking her. And you're like, well, should I thank her for stuff that we've already agreed that she's going to do? Like, if it's her turn to do the dishes, you want me to thank her for that? Yes, that is what I'm saying. Yes, of course, thank her for stuff that you've already agreed. Like, yeah. And you know what it's like to feel underappreciated for stuff you're expected to do? Appreciate her. Love her in the way you wish to be loved. Paul says this. He says, as the scriptures say, he's summarizing this whole section. As a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. This is a great mystery, but it's an illustration of the way Christ and the church are one. An illustration. This is to demonstrate to the world Jesus' relationship to the church. So again, I say each man must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. You show me a marriage in which the wife submits to and respects her husband as Jesus submitted to the Father, and in which the husband loves. You show me a marriage in which the husband loves his wife with the same self-sacrificial spirit that Jesus showed for the church, with which he loved the church. And I'll show you a happy, healthy marriage. I'll show you a marriage in which two people are becoming more like Jesus every day, for the benefit of the church community and for the benefit of our world.